Hello, everyone. My name is Carol Scott. I'm with the National Ombudsman Resource Center, and I want to welcome you to the Recognizing the Importance of Long-Term Care Ombudsman Volunteers webinar. We have a lot of information prepared for you, and we hope that you will take away some good tips and things that you might do to not only welcome and find new ombudsmen, but ways to recognize the current volunteers. Just some housekeeping. I want to remind you that at the bottom of your screen, you will find a Q&A button. That is where we would like you to post questions for the speakers. There's also a chat feature that says chat. And in that, you are welcome to say hello to people. You are welcome to respond to anything that you hear that the speakers say that you want to shout out about. You're welcome to ask other participants in the webinar questions. We will not be looking at those questions, though, for the Q&A. So if you want us to discuss anything, please put those in the Q&A tab, not the chat tab. And following the webinar today, we really appreciate it if you would complete the evaluation, and we will from time to time be putting that evaluation link into the chat feature so that you can get it. And also when the webinar concludes, there'll be an opportunity. So we really appreciate hearing back on ways that we can improve our webinars and also other topics that you might be interested in. Well, this is National Volunteer Week, and so we want to give a shout out to the 5,152 volunteers that are currently in the Ombudsman program. And these individuals have donated 250,000 hours, and that actually is an amazing amount of hours, considering that was this information is from the 2020 National Ombudsman Reporting System. So this was during COVID, and to have 250,000 hours donated while it was extremely difficult to visit. We appreciate the cards, the letters, the phone calls, the outreach that you made to the residents that you normally would be seeing and talking to in person. So, you know, this program is nothing without its volunteers, and what a great thing for those people who donate their time, and we really, really appreciate that. Our speakers today come from the Washington Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. Kristen Hyde is the communications consultant for that statewide program, and Pamela Williams is the King County Ombudsman Program representative. Also joining us today from the California Ombudsman Program is Susan Bashan, and Susan is the program manager for the Fresno, gosh, I forgot to ask how to pronounce that, Madeira, I think that's right, Ombudsman Program. And then we have a special treat today, two volunteers, Kathy Eckert from Pennsylvania and Brenda Malam from Georgia, who are going to just share with us some of their experiences with being an ombudsman volunteer. So at this point, I'm just going to turn things over to Kristen and Pam, and appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks, Carol. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Well, Carol, you'll let me know if you can't. My name is Kristen Hyde, and I am an independent media consultant based here in the Seattle area. I specialize in crisis communications, media relations, message development writing, and supporting policy advocacy and community nonprofit initiatives. Patricia Hunter, our Washington State Ombudsman, brought me on board back in February, March of 2020 at the outbreak of COVID right here in Washington State to help support the program in responding to sudden media coverage and interest, and then continuing to support through that year, 2020. And I'm here with Pamela Williams, who is our King County Regional. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Pamela, but King County is the largest, most populous county in Washington State, and Pamela is the King County Regional Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Okay. Yeah, Pamela, go ahead.
Yes, hello everyone, and I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Pamela Williams, and I am the Regional Long-Term Care Ombudsman for King County. And as Christian mentioned, King County well, first of all, King County is located in Washington State, and it's the largest populous county in the state with 2.25 million people. We also have the largest number of long-term care facilities with over 1,500 facilities throughout the county and over 23,000 residents sheltering those beds. I have been with the program since October of 2018. And
okay, is that, you're done?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, Carol, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to do a big overview. The Washington Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is a small but mighty handful of paid staff, and our outreach and communications team is made up of Patricia Hunter, our ombudsman, a part-time program support person, and myself. We also contract out for graphic design and website design and maintenance, and some online marketing and digital strategy as well. Our process is that we meet every week for about an hour to share updates, assess progress, and determine our priorities for next steps. Our priority since last fall has been building back up the volunteer program. Like many of you, Washington State has suffered a huge loss over the pandemic. We have over 4,300 long-term care facilities across the state, 78,000 residents that we serve through 13 regional offices and a volunteer corps that has dropped from 400 in 2019 to it was at 100 last July 2021. And we're creeping back up here to, I think we're at 141 now. So again, like everyone is experiencing, we have a triple challenge facing us, the higher need for ombudsmen and visitors in general, given the impact of the pandemic, the visitor restrictions, isolation, and especially the staffing shortages that are affecting so many. Number two, just fewer volunteers, and then the loss of pulling back of some volunteers because of the pandemic. And number three, really a continued looming threat from COVID variants that is continuing to make the situation volatile or to chill the interest in people volunteering and applying to become volunteers. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Carol. So our goals are, really the second one, recruiting 200 new volunteers is our primary goal. All of the goals, though, are sort of mutually reinforcing each other. When we do outreach, we raise awareness of the long-term care ombudsman program, what it even does, what the role that we play, and continue to grow public and policymaker awareness of the issues that impact residents. And our audience is pretty broad. It's really trying to get to folks who have time and interest in tourism, and of course, the long-term care residents and family members themselves. Yeah, what is that noise? Is it bad, Carol?
No, you're fine. I'm muting some people that needed. I think that'll help.
Okay. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Our strategies for recruiting volunteers, specifically with the outreach and communications, have been centered on three main strategies. One, I call it earned media. Some people call it free, but basically trying to get local news to cover the program and what we're doing and our call for volunteers, and just continue to get coverage of our issues and our volunteer needs, because that is, free. But of course, I also call it earned because it takes time and effort. Number two, paying for ads, possibly getting some donated space, although that's getting harder and harder to do. And with local media struggling so much themselves, they're just really not doing much in terms of donation and free PSAs like they used to for nonprofits. And then number three, digital outreach, digital marketing ads through news sites and other sites online, kind of like the billboards of the internet. One of the pictures in this slide is a campaign we're still doing right now. We launched to put ads on transit, on buses and trains all around the Puget Sound area. I think it's a 3-month campaign, and it's probably hard for you to see this picture, but it's got a photo that has like an outline of a person that says you on it, and the text is isolated or connected. The difference is pointing to that outline of a person, you, volunteers needed. And we have a QR code on there that would take people to that web page, our website with the volunteer application page. Up here in the far right, that's when Patricia Amy brought me in back in the beginning of 20 with the outbreak of COVID, responding to media there at a press conference. And then this image down here in the left corner is an example of a local publication that we got an article in, as well as placed a paid ad, so sort of that dual strategy there. Okay, we can go to the next slide. We've also been contacting and pitching like-minded organizations to ask them if they would carry an article about our need for volunteers. Groups like AARP agreed to do it. They've got a huge reach, a mailing list of 1 million people, I believe, in Washington State. So this was an e-newsletter that carried an article from us about our need for volunteers. And I think Pamela can talk about, there was a little bit of a bump after that went out with people inquiring about the program and applying to become volunteers. A lot of the counties and even cities have, publications that are willing to run articles, especially if you write them up for them and provide images. Again, this one on the left with King County, there's Pamela there in the photo. So they really love it if you do the writing and the legwork for them and provide the images. Okay, next slide. So outreach to media, again, it's an effort, right? It doesn't just fall in your lap, and it's an investment of time that doesn't always pay off really quickly, but it's an important, valuable investment for the long term. It takes time to develop relationships with reporters, to come up with a pitch that they will get interested in and doing a story. It's important to be responsive to local media, even if they're working on a story that's a little off topic for you. When you become a trusted resource and you're helping connect reporters to the right people, they become more receptive when you do have a story that you want them to cover. So we've dug in. We continue to use any news hook that comes along to get our messages out about the Ombudsman program and pushing the volunteer story, starting to get some coverage on that. And the coverage then gives us an opportunity to also send in letters to the editor. So we're just constantly looking for ways to, get the message out when there's a natural news hook. Over the last, 6 months or a year, for instance, when the mask mandate for long-term care settings went into effect for the staff there, that we knew that reporters would do a story on that. So we, did some outreach so that they would contact the Ombudsman program about that. And other news hooks that have happened over the last 6 months include things like when nursing homes are announcing that they're going to close, where are residents going to go, or when residents were facing evictions that were improper. So proactively just, jumping on those opportunities and being a resource. And then over the last few months, we've really been pushing out, hey, can you please do a story about our urgent need for volunteers? Here's why, and kind of laying out the case there and providing a spokes team that can facilitate reporters doing that story. So the spokes team might include the regional ombudsman staff and at least one or two of their volunteers to talk to reporters. Okay, next slide. We provide tools for staff and volunteers. It's like this in the middle here is just a guideline on how to write a letter to the editor with some hot links in there about how to find the newspaper in your region and how to submit a letter to the editor. And I always make sure folks know I'm here to help, and I can draft letters for folks and then help them submit those letters. So that's, and then this on the right, again, it's fuzzy, hard to see that article, but that is an op-ed that I wrote with a resident who's actually on our state resident advisory council, Susan Harder, and she's in the Yakima area in the middle of the state. And that op-ed was carried in the Yakima Herald Republic, which is the local paper there. That was another way we kind of communicated the resident experience and the important role that the ombudsman plays. And it also called for, at the end, it said that the program needs volunteers. And if you're interested in finding ways to give back to your community, please contact us. One thing we also do as part of our strategy here is to make sure that staff and volunteers feel comfortable and empowered and have some skills to do media interviews, to talk about the program, to stay on the message, and tips for how to do that successfully. So we're there to support. We do preparation anytime there is going to be an interview or a story. We gather as a small group on the phone and go over likely questions that are going to come up from reporters and get folks feeling really comfortable and confident answering those questions. So empowering all the voices in our network to be available, to make a richer, more authentic story with first-person voices, and also just makes us have a deeper bench and reach more people through the kind of multitude effect. Okay. Oh, I was going to say some of Pamela's volunteers have been excellent on this too, and been willing to be quoted about their experience as a volunteer and what they find rewarding about it, which is awesome. We're able to then localize stories with those local volunteers' names and quotes in the papers. It really helps to ground the story and make it more relatable and local for members. Okay, next slide. Oh, this is kind of, again, what we're doing with the preparation for how to be a spokesperson and an ambassador for the program. Kind of going through questions to help folks think about what kind of stories they would like to share if they're given the chance to do an interview or write up a letter. Talking about how to kind of package your message in a story framework. You know, what's the problem out there? What's at stake, who's being threatened or at risk, and you know, how is the ombudsman program, how is being a volunteer part of the solution? And demystifying this whole process of talking more publicly and talking with media, just, you know, helping to make it less intimidating is something that we're doing. Okay, next slide. So impact so far, we are seeing an uptick in the analytics on the website, for instance, folks visiting the website and clicking through to it. I think the term for that is conversion rate, and ours is getting pretty good. It's going up. We're getting more web traffic. We have been receiving some new volunteer applications. We have been becoming more and more of a go-to resource for local media. Patricia gets calls, I would say, almost weekly now from reporters in Washington State wanting to chat about issues that impact long-term care residents. And we're maintaining or increasing support from policymakers when they make budgets about our program too. And I know Pamela might be able to talk about this a little bit more, is when residents and volunteers also feel like empowered and supported as ambassadors of the program. It really helps to cultivate that relationship and engage and helps with retention. Our next steps in our outreach and communications, we're going to be diving a little bit more deeply into some other strategies like direct mail. We're going to test that out. We're going to ramp up digital marketing with ads through local news sites. And like I said, other kind of billboards of the internet, like Google ads and things like that. So one of the next things we're going to be testing out. Pamela, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about your strategies. And Carol, you can stop sharing the slides. Thank you. Oh, there we are.
Thank you, Christian, very much. Yes, I'm going to talk about volunteer retention strategies and recruitment and training during the pandemic with Washington State and King County. Before the pandemic, and 30 volunteers. We lost over half those, but today we're slowly coming back. We're currently at 23. We did get 6 on board right with that article Christian mentioned with that AARP when it was published. Onboarding 6 potential volunteers for our next training class in May. I am so proud that 15 of our volunteers have been with the program longer than a few years during that pandemic. They stayed on with us, 15 of them. And 10 of them have been with the program 5 years or more. Some of the strategies that my team and I used during the pandemic to keep our volunteers engaged, we offered and provided tablets to communicate with their residents. We work closely with IT and we work with the department on there, which made it much user-friendly for our volunteers. Our volunteers also engaged in the postcards. Some created their own postcards with notes, and others used postcards we ordered from NORS. Staff ombuds met the volunteers to hand off the postcards and necessary supplies needed, such as mailing. Some of them, they would meet with or give them the post stamps and the envelopes and things like that so they can mail them off. The team also triaged cases to our volunteers where they were able to problem solve over the phone and have the staff support and reassurance if they needed it. The team also gave specific cases tailored to our volunteers' strengths. Our volunteers are very knowledgeable and detailed when providing services. We currently have a volunteer assisting the team with intake calls. This volunteer used her knowledge that gained over the 15 plus years that she's been here to give out resources. And if the call warrants to be triaged, our volunteer triaged it to a staff ombud who would look at the case and triage it to a volunteer if needed. So monthly meetings, volunteer meetings, and we staff difficult cases during those meetings for our volunteers to discuss as a team as a whole. So overall, it's been a really good process. Some of the tips that we have to attract and retain our volunteers, it's just been a real team effort, and I applaud my staff ombuds who assist with retaining. We asked our volunteers to assist with the 36-hour training. They talk to potential volunteers about their experience and allow questions and answers. This is one of my favorite parts of the 36-hour training class because I get to hear some of the stories that our volunteers are sharing with the potential volunteers, and it's just and you can tell the heart and compassion that when they're sharing their stories. So, and one of the best parts is the 36-hour class is on Zoom. So easier for our volunteers to become involved in that process. Communication is also vital. Keeping phone connection with our volunteers is very important. Our volunteers appreciate being kept in the loop, especially being informed and updated regarding the COVID policy. We keep weekly volunteer meetings. We have newsletters, monthly newsletters, and a lot of times our staff ombuds would just call our volunteers up and check on their well-being and make sure that they're doing the self-care. Some of our volunteers have their own social network. They have their own social group within a group. They call themselves the umbuddies, and kind of have their own training they set aside and success stories with each other. And then they come back to the monthly meeting and they share that with us. Holiday events and other occasions, really special. I enjoy that extra mile, going that extra mile to show our appreciation to our volunteers. We have volunteers with strengths in marketing. They have strengths in closures when facilities are closing. We have volunteers who have been involved in that so much that they want to be a part of that. We also have volunteers who have strengths with dementia, related to dementia. So our volunteers are remarkable, and we illuminate those strengths and assign them to cases that we think is good for them. Or like right now, we have a volunteer is reaching out to Kristen about marketing ideas because she knows about marketing in her past. We also have this one volunteer who is a dementia coach. And when we have these challenging cases with dementia, and she's okay with it. She goes, nope, I can handle it. So she goes out there and do her work. And we have, so it's really, really just amazing. And our volunteers is just remarkable, and I'm just happy to have them aboard. I'm gonna go ahead and talk some more, but thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Kristen and Pamela, and I'll turn it over to Susan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Susan Bouchon. I'm the program manager for the Fresno Madera Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, which is a mouthful, but that's who we are. We're in Central California in the Central Valley. And I apologize for my voice because everything's blooming right now here, allergy season. I've been here since 2016. Prior to accepting my position here, I had extensive background with volunteer management, recruitment. I managed very large programs, up to 250 volunteers. I even had won an award at the White House for a successful program that I developed when I worked for a federal government campaign. After I got here, I realized right away, though, that it was not a volunteer-friendly culture. And I was told that I had volunteers I had to immediately get rid of from like day 2 of my employment. So I began to incorporate my passion for inviting great people to do great work and equipping them to do so and to try to change the culture. So I'm happy to report that that has worked. I have a great team of really caring staff who really take great care of our volunteers and have bought into the whole change in culture. So I'm happy about that. Our stats real quick, we have 8 team members on our staff members rather. We have 28 certified ombudsman representatives right now. We had 49 prior to the pandemic. And when the COVID pandemic, when then it dropped down to like 16, I think it was even 14. Now we're up to 28 and counting. We have a class May 9th through May 13th. We're hoping it'll be a great class. We cover all licensed long-term care facilities in Fresno and Madera counties, which is 38 skilled nursing facilities, 215 to 220 assisted living or residential care facilities, depending on where you're located. We also cover adult residential facilities and intermediate care facilities for allegations of abuse inspections. So we cover about 10,000 residents with our small staff. And how do we get to our volunteers? I want to just get right to it because we all need them. That's why we're all here. Advertising is our most efficient method. It's also the thing that's hard to come up with the money to do. We put together any dollar we could from any of our budget lines, unused mileage reimbursement, which of course we had a lot of when we lost all the volunteers. So we rolled that into our budget for advertising, volunteer expenses, all that. We use training funds. We use our CARES Act money, some of that, different combination, create a pretty large budget. We do a blitz there's a month before the class. We don't advertise a week before the class, but the 3 weeks prior to that, we are heavily advertised. We revisit old contacts. So I keep a very extensive potential volunteer spreadsheet. I review that. I've got them color coded for who's a high level of interest or wanted to attend a class but had a scheduling conflict. I have a comment field that has a lot of really good information. So that when I call them, I refresh the conversations that we've had, and they feel valued right there because I ask them how their knee surgery went or how their mom's doing, whatever they told me was the reason they couldn't come to class. Calls and emails are made to these prospective volunteers that had replied to prior advertising as well. Each of the emails that I send out is crafted with a message that's appropriate to their current standing. Are they interested? Are they signed up? Do they want to do it? Did they sign up and not show up? So I have different levels of contact that I use for them. And then retired ombudsmen are contacted occasionally to see if maybe they're interested in returning. I always invite our current ombudsmen to recruit their friends. It's mentioned at every monthly case review meeting that we hold. And also what I do is every community education opportunity that I do ends with an ask for volunteers. It's a great way. You might get one, and I have gotten people from that. It's crazy. So our current advertising campaign, we have radio and television media partners. We partner with a local advertising firm, which gives us a lot of clout. I had no idea. I was trying to do it on my own. The advertising agency has connections, and they get us much more than we purchase. And then when we partner with our television media partner, we get more than twice what we purchase. So it's a great relationship to have. I encourage you to look into that if you don't have one. We handpick our TV stations and we handpick our radio time slots so that we can reach what I feel is our desired demographic. Callers are always asked, first question on the intake sheet is, how'd you hear about us? And so we ask, if they say radio, do you happen to recall what station? Because I want to know that my advertising dollars are really well spent. So we work with the staff on how to engage the caller. Don't just take a name and phone number, get some information from them. And in a minute, I'll show you the quick form that we use for that. Help them feel valued from the first hello, because remember that, was it Jerry Maguire? You had me at hello. We have them at hello. That's the first impression of what we do and who we are. So there's an information fields that I insist are completed so that when I call them, I feel informed and I feel like they feel valued. And so they're also told when to expect a call from me, because sometimes I'm in a meeting, I'm doing a training, I'm not in the office. I don't want them to think I'm going to call back in 10 minutes and I can't get to them until 4:30 that same day. So that's another way to value them, is to value their time. I do return calls as soon as possible. I review the form. I ask the staff person what comments that they've made. There's a section for them to put comments. What did that mean? Tell me what else you thought. So when I return the call, I have some background information. And then I also have to remember too that the caller who might have just left a voicemail and not spoken to a staff member, maybe they heard the ad after hours and they called at 7:30 at night. They haven't talked to anybody but an answering machine. That's not very friendly anywhere. So I want to be extra friendly with those people. And I really only allow about 20 to 30 minutes at least for each person that I call back, and let them know, here we are, here's what we do. And sorry you got the answering machine, but here I am now. So the next slide is a real quick view of the intake form. I customize it for each class. If the ads are running when I'm on vacation, it says our program manager is on vacation right now, but she'll call you back as soon as she returns. I don't want them to feel like they're not going to be contacted. They're precious to us. They are our most precious commodity. So the next slide talks about how volunteer retention and engagement begins with the phone interview. And I hate doing phone interviews. I'd much rather do it in person. COVID has necessitated that. So I do a phone interview, and at the end of each one, I say, if you would like to get together, I'd love to meet with you in person. And some people want to do that. So in fact, I just had one this morning, and when she's back in town, we were going to get together. It's a great way to connect eye to eye with someone, and they share more with you in person, I think, than they do on the phone. So I asked what motivated them to make the call. What piqued their interest when they heard that 30-second commercial or when they saw it on television? Some of them are familiar with our services. A lot of them can't even say the word ombudsman at all. And so we want to make sure that we understand where they're coming from. Are they coming from a place where they've had a bad experience or a good experience with ombudsman services, or a bad experience with a facility, that type of thing? Some people have a conflict of interest that might preclude them from becoming a certified ombudsman representative. So I need to be sure that I've done due diligence and weeded that information out as well. Some have an axe to grind and the wrong motivation for calling. I actually had one in a class about a year ago that worked for a facility and wanted to go back there and show them how wrong they were to fire her. Because she assumed as an ombudsman, you could go anywhere. No, you go to your assigned facilities. So you have to weed people out and find out what is the motivation. And honestly, every time we run an ad, we have a minimum of 1, as many as 6 people who want to know about, is this a paying job or can it lead to one? So I have to see what their motivation is. I want to know if they know about what we do. Again, people can't even say the word, but have they ever, or has a loved one ever used our services? Are they familiar with what we do? If they are, what interests them in what we do? Here's a big one though. What type of authority do they think that we have? Because most people think we have a lot more authority to do more than we can. We're not enforcement. We are not regulators. We can't write citations. And they think that we can. So we have to make sure they understand that. I always ask about their life experiences, their professional experiences, their work history, things like that. I take that from the SHAPE program, which you may or may not have heard of. It's from Rick Warren's church. I used to be a director of equipping ministry at a large church. And it's learning about their spiritual gifts, their heart for things, their abilities, their passions, and their experiences. And all that makes them who they are. And oftentimes while I'm working through that with them, they share things with me that I note down that makes me just have a soft spot for something that they've said that I want to be sure we acknowledge, recognize, utilize, whatever it might be. The most important part, I think, is listening for objections. An objection is a perceived problem that might get in the way of volunteering. A lot of people have them. I ran a prison ministry for a long time, and let me tell you, there were objections. It's something that's in the way that I don't know if I can get over or not. The most common objection I have found is time. How much time do you want from me? How much time is this going to take? And so that's an easy one to poo-poo. But some things are deeper than that. If you find out what they are, though, it gives you the opportunity to offer information that will help address their concern and hopefully eliminate this potential problem. If they're not addressed, the potential volunteer just might not be able to get past it. Maybe they won't even sign up for the class at all. So you're not doing them any justice by not trying to get to what that objection might be. Worse than that, if you don't know about it, they might complete the whole training process, go to live scan, do their shadowing, get facility assignments, and then never follow through. And we don't want that to happen. That is not valuing our volunteers, nor is it helping our program at all. So care enough about potential volunteers to ask really tough questions and really listen to what they tell you. If you want to go to the next slide, please. I call it meeting them where they're at. I do that in a lot of different ways. First, I discuss their concerns if they have them and objections that in a way that they're comfortable. Like I mentioned, time commitment is a huge one for most people. A lot of folks fear that they have a lack of ability or experience to do ombudsman work. They think it's maybe more medical background than they might have, or they don't have any. They fear that they're going to fail. That's a big one. And that's a common one when you don't feel like you have the tools you need to do anything, whether it's volunteer work or a paying job. So I try to explain everything to them from the beginning. I tell them how facility assignments are made with them in mind. I want it to be really easy for them to do their monthly facility coverage. And we do visit once a month. We require that. So we make every effort to assign them facilities that are geographically convenient for them, close to their home, or if not that, close to a freeway exit and then clustered together. We have a lot of facilities, so it's typically not a problem. I also let them know that when they receive their facility assignment, they're escorted to their facility visits by a staff member to do a polite handoff and to show them how we do our work when we're actually in our facilities. They're guided, they're all the way through the process. I also reassure them that they will never be given a facility assignment that's above their comfort zone. So oftentimes, while they're out doing their shadowing or interning, they will find a preference that they didn't know that they had for a type of facility, a 6-bedder, adult residential facility. I want this, I don't want that. I like this, I don't want to go where they have dementia. Those things come up during their facility coverage, and we try to take them to all different types. And then I also mentioned during the intake call that newly trained ombudsmen are never given the responsibility of covering a skilled nursing facility. We have staff that will do that. We have people who have a lot of experience, and that helps them relax because they're fearful. That's what we're going to do, is throw them to the wolves, send them to a skilled nursing, which we call a sniff, and never check in on them again. So I want to dispel all that during this intake call. I just try to tell them in the end that really all they have to have is passion and wanting to help and a willingness to try. And we can coach them. Having a heart for what we do as ombudsmen is 50% of it. And then reassuring them that we can train them to do the rest, including the paperwork, which I don't know if you all deal with people who hate paperwork, but it's a common complaint. So we deal with the paperwork later. I always ask at the end, it's more fun to do this with a friend, and ask if they know someone who might be interested. I had a husband and wife couple of it because I asked that question, and they covered a veterans facility, and it was awesome. They both had military backgrounds and law enforcement backgrounds, and it was awesome. So always ask that question. You just never know what you might get. I have a volunteer whose mom's going to be coming on board now. And I'm being creative about how I do their assignment. I'll give them a large facility, one that has a locked unit and a regular, so they can share the responsibility of doing the work. Go to the next screen, please. And this is talking about continuing the intake process. I share the time commitment. That's, like I mentioned, the biggest concern is how much time is it going to take? 10-hour shadowing, I explain all that. 18-hour training, 18-hour, I can't say that right. Annual training requirement, monthly facility coverage requirement. Now we have a COVID testing, and we have COVID screening requirements at the facilities. I put that all out there because that's an objection. If they find out about it after and you say, you didn't tell me about this, I don't want to do that. So I make sure they know everything. But make sure that they know that they are in charge of their schedule, the visitation schedule, how many hours they serve each month. The exceptions would be the case review meetings that we require, and things like that that they want to do on their own, like maybe join one of our teams, that's extra. But it's all the case review meetings help fulfill their 18-hour annual training requirement. So it's a win-win. They get there, they get fellowship, they learn, they hear about new things they need to know, and they get their 18-hour fulfillment. So that's awesome. I also let them know at the end that we have ongoing support for and different opportunities for volunteers. Some people like to jump in and do a whole lot. Some people like to sit around the edge and watch and tiptoe and maybe join in, but we have I let them know it's a priority for my staff to be available for them. We have regular business hours. We're closed from 12 to 1. So during that time, I usually stay here. I watch the phone. If a volunteer's name lights up, I answer it because I want them to have a tool if they need it while they're out doing their facility coverage. They have my personal phone number to call me after hours on weekends when necessary. If they need a resource, if they need help, if they have something they don't know what to do, I want them to know they can call me anytime, and they do. Preferably not after midnight, but it's happened. So providing opportunities is a great way to value and encourage volunteers, no matter who they're volunteering for. So I've created some additional teams for them to be part of should they choose to. One of them is a relief team, which is my favorite because when people are sick, when people travel or have a hip replacement themselves, things like that, they can't cover their facilities, and oftentimes they forget to call us, or they call us in plenty of times so that I can have a relief team ombudsman go and cover their facilities for them. So that's a fun one. We send out an email. Hey, we have 4 facilities that need coverage. Can you help? They reply, we get coverage, because our goal is to fulfill our contract, of course. We have a buddy team, and that formed from a really friendly class that I had, and they hit it off. They met for coffee. They went for lunch, they stayed friends. So a buddy team is something where you can meet with another volunteer in a not work environment and build friendships that are based around your love for ombudsman work. A little more structured version of that would be our mentoring team, where we match somebody with an experienced volunteer ombudsman who they can call. and they can befriend. And then the community outreach team is something we're building now along with the fundraising team a little bit. That's kind of in the works, but the community outreach team, I tell them at pretty much every case review, you all have a circle of influence, you all have friends, you all have meetings, clubs, things that you belong to. And if you can arrange for me to come and have whatever, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, so we can talk about the work of ombudsman and that we'd love to have them be part of it, that would be great. So that's part of the community outreach team, and we let them share in that opportunity when it happens. And then at the end of the call, I ask them if they have any questions that haven't been answered. Most of the time people say, no, you answered even more than I thought I had. That happened this morning with a wonderful volunteer who's going to be in our May class. So then I tell them, here's what's going to happen next. Tell them when to expect the welcome email. I describe the attachments that will be with it. Here's a map to our place. Here's the training invitation. Here's all the things you need. And if you have any questions about what I'm sending you, please call me. And then there's a welcome letter that has pretty explicit instructions in there about the class, what's expected, that type of thing. I make a follow-up call a couple of days later, make sure they got the email. A lot of times it goes to junk mail because of the attachments. So what I do is I send it to myself, I BCC, blind CC them, so it avoids potential spam, and they usually will get it that way. And then they don't need to see everybody else's email address if I'm sending out 5 or 6 or 10 at the same time. So I use the BCC feature. A lot of my folks don't have printers at home. A lot of my volunteers are elderly themselves and they're not real tech savvy and they don't have a printer. So in that case, I have to make sure that the email is not just wasted, because I will offer to print out and mail the packet to them via US mail, which they'd get in a couple of days. So after I'm done, I put comments from the conversation into the potential ombudsman spreadsheet and remarks and the things I need to remember for when I call them or when I meet them in person. Then I send a class invitation confirmation for anyone who registers. The Friday before class, I personally call them. And then that helps everybody feel really valued, that we're excited to have them. They know we're expecting them. We've prepared a place for you. Sometimes they'll cancel. Oh, something came up and I can only make 2 days or whatever. So I tell them when the next class is. I make notations in the spreadsheet, and I just keep in communication with them throughout the process. If you go to the next slide, please. And oh, you're already there. You're good. Now the training class week. Let's see. Yep. The training class week is the next slide, right? The training class week. Yep. So when they are there, we have everything ready for them. And the room is decorated. There's everything, their binders and materials. We give them highlighters, white line, everything to be able to take notes and participate. And then there's chocolate all over the tables, sprinkled all up and down the tables is glorious, because we believe in chocolate, the power of chocolate. So we have also put all of their training on we call them a thumb drive, flash drive, whatever, so that they can take it home and have the videos and the trainings all on their own computer. We do introductions, and I don't worry about how long they take. We ask who you are, why you're here, what experiences you might have had that brought you here. Sometimes this will take quite a while, but it's really an eye opener. I have a staff member write down what they say, so that we can remember that, because sometimes it comes into bearing when we're doing facility assignments, and it helps us understand them a lot better. It's very revealing. So then all that goes together. We explain the objectives for the week. We talk about live scan and shadowing, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we just go on and train, send them off to live scan, and life is good. Next slide is about shadowing and interning. So prior to interning, I asked my staff to pull some facilities aside and don't cover them until shadowing weeks happen. And that way they get to see a variety, intentionally selected facilities, not only the good ones. We want them to see everything, because that's what they see when they're out in the field, the volunteers. So we want to make sure they're exposed to a little bit of all types. Sometimes trainees will request a facility that they have visited during their shadowing, which is cool. They feel comfortable there. And sometimes they find that they have a background that makes them comfortable in working with a facility that they maybe hadn't considered, like an adult residential facility. The cool thing is, while my staff member is escorting them out for shadowing, they're also doing their facility coverage. So It's like you kill two birds with one stone. You got shadowing done and you got your monthly facility visit covered. So that's awesome. We put out the sign out sheets the first day of class. The expectation is set forth. Within the next 2 weeks after this class is over, you will have completed your shadowing. You pick the time, you pick the day. We offer shadowing Monday through Friday, a minimum of 2 sessions a day. There's 4-hour, 2-hour, and 3-hour sessions. As long as you come up with 10 hours, I don't care how, give me your sheet when you've selected them, we'll schedule you. And we never do more than 2 volunteers with an ombudsman because we don't want the residents to feel overwhelmed. So it's great. We have 12 options a week, I think is what we offer. And so the last day of class, this is all going on Monday through Thursday. The last day of class, I give them the shadowing schedule, and I also send them to live scan. We don't scan, and I debate this. I know some of you do, some don't. I don't scan prior to class because when I tried it, I've had them not show up. It's a lot of money. I don't want to waste their time, my time, and our money to scan someone that isn't going to follow through. If they're there Monday through Thursday, they're going to follow through. So we send a live scan on Friday, unless it's a large class. Like we had a class of 28 trainees. It was awesome. And what I did is I sent 5 or 6 each day. I notified live scan that I would be doing so. And then the last class of 7, I just split them into 2 days. So we're hoping I have to split them into multiple classes after, trips to live scan after our May class. That's what we're hoping for. Till the next scan, getting them out in the field. I'm sorry, the next slide. Getting them out in the field is the most exciting part, and that's what they want. And they're a little nervous, but they're escorted, as I mentioned, to their facility assignments by a staff ombudsman. That's a way to value them. You don't just throw them out in the field, which was the common practice when I came here. We take them there, we introduce them, we give them a guided tour, we show them how we use our tracking forms to capture our instances where we have provided information and assistance to an individual or to a facility staff member, and we show them later how that all comes into play. But it's awesome, but they are trained, drilled into their head that they must cover their facilities at least once every month, and that they have to let us know when they are unable to do so. And that, again, that's where the relief team comes into play. A volunteer facility assignment meeting is set up immediately after shadowing is completed. So that's among myself and my staff. We sit together, we talk about who did what, how it went with this volunteer out in the field, how'd the shadowing go, what do you think, they like this, they like that. So then we, again, make every effort to make assignments that are great for them and honor the volunteers' wishes, where they live, their experience in their lives, and their availability, what works well for them. The next thing is about paperwork. It's hated. Everyone doesn't like it. I don't do anything with it during training. I don't focus on it. I talk about it. I refer to it. They can't comprehend what their job is yet, let alone how to record things. So they're introduced during shadowing. I don't want to overload them. We choose to focus on the training, the interactions with the residents, consent, which is huge, and our overall best practices as ombudsman. So we delay the paperwork. And then when they are done with their first facility visits, we instruct them to make a one-on-one appointment with one of my staff members we can show them individually how to do the paperwork. And sometimes it takes more than one of those. We also offer on the first Thursday of every month a paperwork workshop. We just ask that they tell us if they're coming. I allow enough staff as necessary. Sometimes it's one staff, sometimes it's a whole staff, depending on how many people are attending. But it promotes interaction with us. It helps them understand what we're looking for, what we need to be able to report for our contractual needs. And it's a win-win. So we really kind of look forward to those. But assuming volunteers, as you can see, it's involved, as you know. I'm not saying as you see, I know you all do this. It's in every step along the way that we do, from the moment we answer the phone to them, to every time we greet them at a meeting or through the whole process of being a volunteer. I think ongoing support from our program office staff is the most important thing we can give. I continue to try to meet them where they're at, because where they're at will change. And you have to be aware of those things with your volunteers. Some of them are a little fragile themselves because of what they've just lived through. A lot of them have just lost a loved one and they really want to give back, but they're not quite ready. So we watch for that. I always look for coaching opportunities to help them increase skills. I don't look at them as problems, they're opportunities. If something goes wrong, they didn't handle something right, I don't want them to feel bad. I want them to feel valued, and I want to coach them through it and then check back with them and see how it worked. And is it still working? So we do that a lot. We share good stories at our meetings all the time. A job well done, or maybe a challenge that they conquered that was really tough and didn't start out well, but it ended great. Those are perfect. I try to make sure that they have the tools and resources that they need. So of course, before, right when they finish class, I order their name badges, their business cards. We give them a polo shirt. We have this really cool toolkit. I wish I had one. They're in the other building that we created for our volunteers to take out in the field. It's got everything they need in it: forms, intake, pens, resources, you name it. But the most important thing, I think, is to always make time for them. I'm never too busy for a volunteer. And if I'm in a meeting, I will call them as soon as I'm done. And we do have a volunteer recognition event every year, and we celebrate our volunteers. So we try to do it during the week of National Volunteer Month, the last week of the month. But this year with COVID being so like up to the last minute, we're going to do it at the end of June 29th, I think. So we just started adding social media posts to help value them too, and promote our volunteerism, and to brag about our volunteers. We just started doing that literally in the last month or so. I'm not real tech savvy. I'm job security for IT departments. That's my job. So where are we now? We're offering 3 more classes this year. Our staff still continues to do a great job. I love the way they love on our volunteers. I can't ask for any more than that. Our volunteer workforce is almost rebuilt to pre-pandemic level. We just launched a new online training I can't talk today, sorry. Online training platform, which kind of gives them up about 20 hours of training that counts towards their 36. So right now I'm doing a lot of hybrid trainings where they will do that, and they'll come to at least 2 days of the live class if they cannot commit for the week. And we'll see how that works. I'm meeting them where they're at with their availability, and that's what counts. So we're in the process right now of establishing new norms, like we all are, as far as our targets and contract goals. But we're looking forward to it being like it used to be, because it was glorious when it was easy to recruit and train and love on volunteers. So if we can do it though during the pandemic, which we've been rebuilding after decimation, I think we can easily do it in the future. So we're doing a very aggressive training schedule because our attrition rate is much higher than normal. So as soon as we get a class done, we start prepping for the next class. And I just kind of made a note of some of the actions that we focus on that support volunteer retention: coaching, celebrating, equipping, inviting, esteeming, valuing, recognizing, sharing knowledge, spending time with them, providing opportunities. Those are some of the actions that help us support our volunteer recruitment and retention. There's a lot more. Y'all have your own. They all help building strong volunteer relationships, and that's what we are all about. So thank you. I hope that some of this has been helpful to you. If you need anything, contact me. It's my name at valleycrc.org. And now I will turn it over to Kathy Eckert. Kathy?
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. Wonderful presentation. My name is Kathy Eckert, and I am from Pike County, Pennsylvania. And if you don't know where Pike County is, it is in northeast Pennsylvania. It is right where the state of Pennsylvania meets New Jersey and New York. So that gives you a rough idea of where I'm located. I joined the Volunteer Ombudsman Program back in 2015. And those were the days where we didn't have online training options. I actually had to do the 2-part in-person training session. So I got my certification completed in 2016. My original thought for joining the program was that it really fit into my schedule. I was looking for something to do. I was working full-time, but I still wanted something to be able to give back to the community. And this particular program was advertised in a local newspaper, which is what caught my eye, and it offered me an opportunity to do things on weekends or after hours, and that was really what made me join the program to begin with. I retired in 2017, and then, of course, I became much more active in the program, being able to do things like exit surveys and care plan meetings and resident council meetings. So that's basically how I ended up in the program. I was interested in the program from the very beginning because my grandmother, when she got older, couldn't take care of herself anymore. She couldn't live alone. And so she moved in with me. I took care of my grandmother for a number of years. And then as she got to be in her early 90s, she really needed much more skilled care, and so I ended up putting her into a skilled nursing facility. And visiting her in that skilled nursing facility certainly did open my eyes to some of the things that go on in the facility, and I really learned how important visiting people were. Not only visiting my grandmother, who eventually ended up with dementia, but there were other residents there that I talked to and spent time with, and how appreciative they all were of having someone come in and visit them. And again, I wasn't there from, the ombudsman standpoint. I was just a family member visiting, and just being the eyes and the ears for my grandmother and seeing how important it was to provide some company to the other residents and hear their stories. All of the residents have had such great stories to tell, their own life experiences, and you can learn so much from the residents. And as an ombudsman now, being able to support the residents and help them live with dignity and respect, I think is very, very important to them and to me as well. So being able to advocate for them is a gift, and I'm very appreciative that this program even exists. Of course, the best part of the program is the residents. Talking to them, being with them, you're part of their life and they're part of yours. Getting to meet some of the family members, all of these things are great experiences, and I think that that is something that we need to play up when we're looking to recruit volunteers. Just what wonderful people they are. Now, I know there's a lot of time and money that's spent on advertising and doing presentations to senior organizations and what have you, but I really think that the whole inviting a friend is really paramount. Susan mentioned her program about inviting a friend, and I think that people who can talk one-on-one to their friends or their families is important. I think that from my perspective as a volunteer, that the staff ombudsman should really look at possibly a brochure of some sort, something that could be distributed one-on-one. If I have, friends, or I go to a book club, or possibly I can put them out in the corner of my church, I think a brochure of some sort would be great. And we don't have that here in Pennsylvania that I'm aware of. If we do have one, I've never seen one. But I would certainly like to have a brochure, so that would give me an intro to invite other people to volunteer. I also think it's important for the staff to use their volunteers locally. We as volunteers have a huge community. Many of us are part of organizations. We're part of a church, or we're part of a senior group, or we're part of a book club. It could be any number of things. And I think it's important for the staff to reach out to the volunteers and ask them, is there something going on in your community where we have an opportunity to recruit someone? Do you have a local newspaper we could advertise in? Is there a church bulletin? Would your church be willing to do it? Personally, here at my church, I'm also in charge of the communications program, and so we run not only the weekly bulletin for the church, but the church has a Facebook page, and Facebook reaches a lot of people. Even those people who may not be a member of our church community still follow the church. We send out weekly emails to people who register. So we have a weekly email that goes out to 200 people. Now, again, it may not seem like a lot of people, but we're a very small county, and so 200 people is a lot. And those 200 people may know another 200 people. And I think that it's important to use your own local community resources to try to recruit people. So, again, a brochure, posting some information on a community bulletin board may really be very helpful. Having your volunteers out there. when the county fairs are coming up and all of these other, maybe there's a market or someplace where you take a table. A lot of times the tables are staffed by the staff versus the volunteers. And I think it's really a good thing to have your volunteers included in all of those community events. Again, because I think the volunteers know their local community better than maybe some of the staff members do. So my tip for recruitment is to never lose sight of the local community. And the other thing that I just want to spend a minute talking about is the training program. Some of the other folks on this presentation talked a little bit about computer literacy and being tech savvy. And I think that's very important. Certainly, I'm not the most tech-savvy person, but I can do a Zoom meeting. I can do a WebEx. I can do emails, of course, and all of those things. But I do know a lot of people who are interested in volunteering but don't have an email address, don't have a computer. And so it's very difficult for those people when you start to talk about training. They can't do online training in their homes. And again, here in Pennsylvania, to my knowledge, locally, we don't offer an in-house sort of computer training program. We expect the volunteers to do their annual training, to do their initial certifications now is even online. So I think it would be very important to set something up locally, maybe in the staff office or somewhere else. Maybe you have another volunteer that could help someone. But if you have someone who's interested in joining the program but isn't tech savvy, I think you need a way to make sure that they're still connected. And whether, again, that be a mentor that helps them through that process, an opportunity to come into the staff office once or twice a month and have, someone walk them through it. But I really do think that that's important. I also think that communication is important. Pam mentioned communication. And again, I think sometimes communication gets lost, especially in areas where the state office is not directly in touch with the volunteer. I'm not sure about other states, but here in Pennsylvania, sometimes the ombudsman program is outsourced. And so the state people will be in touch with the outsourced organization, but not necessarily directly with the volunteers. So it's really important that the communication from the state to the outsourced community, to the volunteer, gets the communication. Especially during the whole COVID issue, a lot of times I felt left out because I wasn't involved in anything as a volunteer. And so I think it's really important to make sure that your volunteers don't feel left out of the whole process. I think that's one of the reasons you can retain your volunteers. Make sure they're in the loop. Make sure they stay engaged. And so those are my comments on volunteers. Again, volunteers are in high demand. So I think it's really important for us to keep the volunteers engaged. I think it's important to emphasize all the positives of our program, flexible schedules, opportunities to learn new things, to be engaged with residents, to be a part of their lives is really important. So, paid mileage, covered expenses, a lot of those things we offer that other programs don't. So I think it's important that we focus on all of those issues. And so those are my tips for retention. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brenda, who's going to help with some other volunteer tips. Brenda, it's all yours.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my stories with all of you, and I hope there's something helpful here. Just this week, the Georgia Long-Term Care Ombudsman Office sponsored a volunteer appreciation conference it was a 1.5-day conference, and there was some training, and some of the staff ombudsman attended the conference too. And since I knew I was going to be on this call today, I took the opportunity at the conference to ask some of the ombudsman, the staff ombudsman, what it was that made a good volunteer for them. And almost all of them said two things. They had different answers, but they almost always said somebody with passion and somebody with commitment. And that's good, but how do you identify that in someone who applies to be a volunteer? And I started thinking about how I got involved with it. And there may be some clues here for how to identify someone with passion and with commitment. But I've been a volunteer in Metro Atlanta since 2008. Anyway, it's been 15 years. And I got involved after my mother died in a nursing home from what I felt was neglect. And I was just eaten up with guilt and with anger, and I just needed to do something. And I spoke with my priest, and he advised me that I needed to find some way to channel all that anger and all that guilt into something positive. And I remembered when my mother was in the nursing home, the ombudsman that was there at that facility, how helpful she had been to us, and how compassionate and kind, but also she was able to get things done for us, and she was able to help us maneuver through the system. So I gave her a call, and I told her I was interested in volunteering, and she met with me, and she was happy that I wanted to do it. And she sort of took me under her wing and guided me through the whole application process. And then she was my mentor. She trained me as I went through the process of learning. And she and I became good friends. So we developed just a pretty strong personal relationship. And I had the commitment and the passion in spades. I thought I was going to save the world. I was going to fix this situation single-handedly. I was so passionate that one day when I was leaving to go to the nursing home visit, my husband shouted after me, "Well, honey, you forgot your superwoman cape." And I took myself so seriously, and I took the work so seriously that once I was given my little elevator talk to 3 gentlemen there at the nursing home, and they listened intently to me and were very interested, it seemed, in what I had to say. And when I was finished, one of them came a little closer to me, and he said, "Well, honey, let me ask you something." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, he got real close to me, and he said, "Is them your real teeth?" So I learned a little bit to not take myself quite so seriously. And Susan mentioned volunteers that have some kind of axe to grind. And I did. And I know volunteers like that can be a real pain for staff ombudsmen, because they can cause more problems than they help. But probably if I had not had my mentor who had taken me under her wing, the program would have had to let me go, because I just wanted a head on a platter every time I went. And I didn't care if it was the maintenance man or the CNA or the administrator or the UPS delivery man. I wanted a head on a platter. I was so mad, so upset, and so angry and guilt-ridden. But my mentor took time to teach me a better way. She didn't hold back when she needed to rein me in, but she always dispensed that criticism with lots of grace and love. And the other side of that was that I had to be willing to hear and accept the criticism and to apply it then, to figure out how to apply the suggestions that my mentor was giving me. And I think that only comes with a relationship of trust. I trusted her, and I knew she knew what she was doing, and she knew what she was talking about, and she knew what worked and what didn't. And it takes time and effort to develop that kind of relationship, but it pays, I think it pays off. And one way you can recognize commitment in a volunteer, even a half crazed, mad as a hatter, guilt-ridden lunatic like I was, is that if that volunteer is open to criticism and then applies it, you can be pretty sure they're committed. And if they get defensive and get their back up every time you have to correct them, then they may not be as committed to making the residents' lives better as they are to getting some kind of revenge. But I think people who have experienced personally the horrors of a nursing home can be the most passionate people you can find. They really have skin in the game, and they understand and know what's going on in the nursing homes. And they, a lot of times, really want to do something about it. But they may need someone to tone down their anger and direct it toward finding appropriate ways to solve problems and never lose sight of what we're really trying to do is make the residents' lives better. And it seems to me the whole program and really the entire long-term care system works best when the time and effort are given to develop strong personal relationships. And it's a personal relationship between the staff ombudsman and the volunteer, a personal relationship between the volunteer and the residents, and a personal relationship between the residents and their caregivers. And I think it helps promote not only a better quality of life for the residents, but also a lot of safety if there can be personal relationships among the residents themselves. Anyway, I would ask that the staff ombudsman who are looking for volunteers give a second look at those people who seem to have had bad experiences and have an axe to grind. And there may be somebody, you may find somebody there who will be a 15-year volunteer like I've been. And I set out to help the residents and their families, and I thought I was their savior. But in the end, it ended up being they who saved me. I'm so grateful for the personal relationships that have enriched my life for these last 15 years. The personal relationship with the staff ombudsman, the people with the program. They're just fantastic people with really good hearts. And I'm so thankful for having them in my life. I am most thankful for the personal relationships I've developed with the residents. And just like Kathy said, their stories are just life-changing. That you really get some life lessons from listening to them. And I hope something I've said is helpful. So I'll turn it back over to Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Kathy. I think hearing from you guys directly from volunteers is such an important part of recruiting and retaining volunteers. I want to thank you both for for all the information and the passion that you are sharing. And you'll see in the chat that people are showering love on the two of you. So I want to just take a few minutes and talk about the survey that NORC just did. We sent out a survey across the nation and asked volunteers to respond. And we actually got 596 responses, which is an incredible amount. Representing volunteers from 34 states. And you'll see that interestingly enough, one of the larger portions of these volunteers were less than 1 year. And then the 3 to 5 years was the second, 6 to 10, and the 1 to 2 and the 11 or more. So a lot of experience and a lot of new folks responded to this survey. We asked what attracted them to the program, and I will tell you that reading through 596 responses was a little bit overwhelming. Well, actually, it was a lot overwhelming. And I will tell you that we are still working through all of these responses, and we will be putting together a complete report and sending it out to all the programs, because I think that hearing from these volunteers, there are some strong messages that they are giving out. But you know, the thing that it has attracted the folks in the survey, I think, are the same things that attracted Brenda and Kathy. That they felt a connection with older folks. They had an experience with the facility. They wanted to give a contribution back to their community, and you'll well, there's a lot of different things that attract people, and I think as people are looking for ways to recruit, it's always important, just like was said by Kristen at the beginning, you need to go to where people are, and if you know what's attracted the people you have now, that's where you want to try to put your emphasis. We asked also, why do you continue to volunteer? And again, I think Brenda and Kathy hit this nail on the head, that they recognize the importance of the work. They enjoy the residents that they're working with. I love this one survey response, which is, I had high expectations and so far they have been exceeded. So it's just wonderful to know that that the volunteers are having a good experience, and that's one of the reasons why they stay with the program. We asked, what's the most rewarding part of being involved with the Ombudsman program? Gaining the residents' trust, the relationships, and helping to improve the quality of life, being a good advocate, listening to the stories of residents, being heard when they talk to staff. Often I'm the only person that visits a resident, resolving problems and making a difference, keeping the facility on their toes, ability to identify needs and address them and see the results of my efforts. I think knowing why someone volunteers can help inform programs on how do I ask someone else to be a volunteer. Messages or keywords that these volunteers who entered their comments in this survey would suggest to you program staff, to say when recruiting new volunteers, to say, you know, a theme could be loneliness is awful. And this is a program that can help combat loneliness of nursing home and assisted living residents. One person said, I'd never heard of the Ombudsman program until a friend spoke about it. And that is that person-to-person, current volunteer to friends and family. And then being the voice for those who can't speak for themselves. I mean, that is actually what the word ombudsman means. It means to speak on behalf of others. And so that's a good message that can be easily presented to the audiences that you are reaching out to. In 2019, or actually in 2018, the Administration for Community Living contracted with the NORC Chicago, which is not our NORC, but another NORC, Chicago, to do a study talking about the volunteers in the Ombudsman program. And what they found out at that time, and these numbers are from 2019, was that there were at that time about 500,000 hours donated, which equaled 257 full-time employees if we put their hours together to make a full-time employee. And so that is almost I can't read the slide there because it's covered up. Well, anyway, there's millions and millions that these volunteers are giving to the Ombudsman program. They also asked for the characteristics of who were the volunteers in 2019. So when you're looking to target who you're recruiting, it looks like 76% were female, which leads me to believe we need to find more men. But you know what? We don't have to look for men or women. We just look for the right person with the passion. Most people have some kind of college degree, but again, it's not, this is just saying what the current volunteer or 2019 volunteer looked like. Most were retired, but, working out a way to have volunteers visit in the evenings and weekends works for people who are employed full-time. The motivations, I think these motivations, the information here matches the survey that we just did, that people find this to be something that benefits them. They're interested in the program's mission, and some are using this as career development. Some resources. This is the report that I was just getting these numbers from. The NORC at the University of Chicago. This is the link, and all of these slides, we've been putting the link into the chat, but it will also be on the NORC website and it will be sent out to you when we send out the recording information from this webinar. But this report's only 17 pages long. I highly recommend that staff who are interested in doing recruitment take a half hour and skim through the information in this report. Another resource that you have is on the NORC website. And this is the link right down here. There's all kinds of information in the Getting Started tab that will help direct you to examples of resources to do recruitment. Okay, so we have 2 minutes, unless we go over, for a question and answer. So I'm going to just jump in and ask any of the speakers if you, well, I'm going to try to jump in. I'm having trouble opening up the Q&A. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to put this to real briefly. Okay, let me just say, we're going to go over. So if you need to leave, you'll get a copy of this recording and you can scoot ahead and listen to this last part. But I want to get some of these questions asked and answered on while we're in the webinar. So the question came up regarding the word shadowing and the fact that some volunteers make it feel like they're in the background, and that they're not valued for their own input. Any thoughts on how to either, and this is aimed at Pam and Susan and Kristen, any way to maybe help when that word is used, or any thoughts on how shadowing should not be? I mean, it's you get my, are you getting my question? Are we getting the question?
We've been transitioning to interning, but that was the vernacular that had been used here for 30 something years. So we've been, you'll notice I put shadowing / interning on my screens.
And we call it on the job training, OJT. So we don't really use it shadowing, we just tell them we have on the job training for that.
Okay. The other comment that was on here, we never use the word use volunteers. We always say work with volunteers, who are often more precious to the program's success than the staff who are paid. So I appreciate that. Question came in, and Susan, I think this is for you. What is LifeScan?
LiveScan is the background clearance process that we use, and the results go to the Department of Justice for California, and they do the background with FBI. It does FBI and I don't know who the other one is, FBI and DOJ. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And so again, for Washington and California, do you all only have certified ombudsmen who can investigate complaints? And how do you plan to meet the standards of promptness when a new complaint is received along with the minimum monthly visit?
In my program, I only have the staff handle the investigations. I had created a staff position just for that. And that person went on to grad school. And so now we've just divvied it up among staff so that we can have a timely response and know that it's being followed up on efficiently, quickly, and properly.
Okay, thank you. Pam, you have a response to that? Do your volunteers investigate complaints?
Yes, our volunteers investigate complaints. They go to the facility and they do that the entire investigation. We treat our ombuds just like the staff, and they are very, very detailed with their investigation. And if there's something challenging that they feel that it needs a staff assistance, they will seek us.
Okay, I will say that of the 596 people that completed the recent NORC survey, about 80% of them indicated that they do complaint investigations. And I think that kind of follows along with the new ombudsman rule, well, new 5 years old, that really says that if the word ombudsman is being used as a title, that those people are to have gone through all of the training and they have all of the responsibilities of the Older Americans Act as part of their job, although a lot of people are being grandfathered in. So people who've been doing this for a while may not be doing complaint investigations. But so another question, how many hours are required for the monthly visit? And Susan, I think that's directed at you.
We don't have a requirement. Realistically, if they turn in their activity log and they're spending 15 minutes at a facility, I need to coach them. It takes longer than that to visit with 6 residents, check in, follow up. So it's case by case, actually. And some people will go and spend, we had one that just did handoffs for facilities in a town that's kind of out of our way here. She spent I think it was 8 hours out in the field, getting her new assignments because she wanted to really understand them. So it's going to be different, but if they're not spending an adequate amount of time, they're not representing the ombudsman program well, and they need to be coached on what their purpose is.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's see. So who does the data entry for your volunteers? Pam, you're muted.
Sorry, the staff ombuds, and I have an intake coordinator that will enter the activity reports for our ombudsman. So they have their own hard copy paper, and then we have what you call a secured internet, so they will send that a secure email. I'm sorry, so they will send that document to that staff ombuds, and then they would enter the activity reports inside our system. Or they will enter a case. If it's a case, they'll enter it. So rather it's activities or a case, either one goes in by the staff or the intake coordinator that we have.
Okay. Susan, someone is curious about why your volunteers are not going into nursing homes and are only visiting smaller homes.
Well, that's based on their experience. What I want to do is reassure them when I speak with them on the phone the first time, that we're not going to put them in an environment they're not comfortable with. Most people are very fearful of going into a skilled nursing, even to visit someone they love, let alone going into a facility to provide ombudsman services of which they yet know nothing about. So I just tell them up front, if we give you your assignment based on your comfort level and your education, your background and your work experience. There's a lot that goes into making a good placement. And I tell them typically a new ombudsman would receive assisted living or RCFE. And then when they're comfortable with more, they can ask for more. Some people, though, are comfortable that based on the fact that they used to be a CNA or they're a retired RN. Of course, they're comfortable in the SNF environment, skilled nursing environment. So it's, again, person by person, but I want to disarm them when I'm dealing with the typical objections. And that's one of the biggest ones that I come across.
Thank you. Pamela, for your volunteers who investigate complaints, how do you plan for the time commitment for volunteers when they sign on? I'm not quite sure I understand that, but I hope you do.
Well, we ask our volunteers to commit to 4 hours a week, which comes out to like 20 hours a month, or give or take. We don't really have a specific sign in, if they do a case, because sometimes they have to research how to resolve that concern or case. So we don't really have a specific time. We just give them 20 hours a month to do the work. And yeah, I'm not quite sure if that answers the question.
I think if not, they'll get back with us. Thank you. And I'm not sure I understand this next one either, but how do you maintain volunteer morale high when we observe something that, and I don't know what AHCA stands for other than American Healthcare Association, but I'm thinking that's not what this is. Maybe that, I don't know what the sorry, whoever wrote that question, I don't know what that says. But anyway, the question is I think this is Pamela, you and Susan. How do you maintain volunteer morale high when we observe something that AHCA may not see when they go out? I'm not sure.
Guessing that maybe their licensing entity, like in California, we have CDPH probably.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, there we go.
And that happens a lot with both of our entities that we deal with. Community care licensing is who monitors and licenses our assisted livings. They rarely substantiate a complaint. And then California Department of Public Health does the skilled nursing because they're healthcare. they're a little more apt to issue a citation, but they have to observe the same conditions that we saw when we were there. And that's hard to do. It's very frustrating. How do we help our volunteers deal with the fact that they put so much effort and heartache into dealing with an issue that they said, oh, no, fine. It's hard, but they have to be encouraged to continue on. They have to They have to try. Every time that a licensing entity goes out into a facility, helps them see that there are problems here. Maybe you didn't see it today, but they're on the radar. You got to keep them on the radar if they're a facility that needs attention.
And I echo what Susan says, and I also invite those licensures to our monthly meetings. You know, I would invite that the DSHS, whoever is licensing, I would, they have came to our meetings and did presentations to our volunteer meetings where our volunteers are able to ask those questions about certain things.
Great, thank you. And the person who wrote the question in did confirm that she was talking about the regulatory agency. So you guys hit that nail on the head. Well, I want to thank Kristen and Pamela and Patricia from Washington State. I want to thank Susan from California. I want to thank Brenda and Kathy from Georgia and Pennsylvania. This has been wonderful information. All of your contact information will be available to anyone who wants it. And so you may just be overwhelmed and become a YouTube star or something. But again, I want to thank you, especially Brenda and Kathy, for your dedication and passion for allowing and taking the time to be the voice and ears and mouth of residents who often can't speak on their own. Just a reminder that all of this will be posted on our on the NORC website, and certificates for those who registered and listened at least 30 minutes will be sent out in the next day or so. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thank you. And thank you guys.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Great to be here.
Bye.